check, my check, my check. My check, my check, my check. My check. So what's up, everybody? I hope everybody is doing well. It's springtime here in Toronto, and the days are getting longer and warmer, and we're getting a lot more sunshine. And it's definitely a welcome change versus the weather that we've been having over this past winter, which has been unusually cold and long and dark. And so it's just it's good to get into some warmer weather for sure, especially this year. This is Ballistics session 3. If you missed the first couple of sessions, the idea with Ballistics is I review different photographers' work, including some shots of my own, and a lot of photographers that I admire, both the classic photographers, maybe local photographers, and international as well. And for today's episode, I'm going to be looking at the work of one of my favorite classic street photographers, and definitely one of my absolute favorites. Her name is Vivian Maier. And Vivian's a really interesting photographer for a lot of reasons. She has a really interesting history. She shot most of her work in the 50s and 60s, and she was actually born in New York City and lived in Europe for a while, where her family's from. And she later moved back to America and lived mostly in Chicago and New York. And she also did a fair amount of travel around the world. And it was really interesting because her photography wasn't actually discovered and made famous until after her death in 2009. So that's one of the really interesting aspects about Vivian. And Vivian's street photography has definitely had a huge impact, I think, on my style of street photography, in that she tended to focus a lot of her work on marginalized individuals and groups in society. And it's kind of the same thing with myself. And she tended to notice a lot of details on the street that a lot of other photographers might miss, and she tended to shoot a lot of everyday scenes, which I think I can relate to as well. And I think that I'll definitely be making another session of Ballistics in addition to today's, talking about some of Vivian's work. And I'll probably make a dedicated video just speaking about her really interesting history and her amazing street photography as well. So for now, let's get into this one. So this is one of Vivian's infamous self-portraits that she often does. She has a whole bunch of these, and what I like in particular about this one is that she has, I'm assuming this is one of the children that she acts as a nanny for, and I just like the look of the kid's like facial expression in this shot. And Vivian kind of has like a more of a blank stare, which is typical in a lot of her self-portraits. But the expression on the child is just interesting. It just seems like, to me, what I read into this is Vivian has her vision and her perspective on how she sees the world, and a lot of maybe adults can't really relate to that or understand it. But a child's mind, and this kid in particular who maybe has a more personal relationship with Vivian, she gets it, she kind of understands what Vivian is doing. She doesn't think that it's weird. Vivian is pointing this big Rolleiflex camera at this mirror or whatever it might be in the middle of a busy street in the city, and she's on the same page and on the same level as Vivian, So that's kind of what I like about this shot. And then you got the sub-framing happening and interesting lighting and things, and but I think it's mostly just the I guess you could say the dynamic of the relationship between Vivian and this child that are like, okay. So for this photo, one of the themes in Vivian's work is that she shot a lot of marginalized people and lower class people, but she also shot a lot of people in the upper class, and that, you know, maybe had a higher status at that time in society. And I think this is definitely one of the subjects, and the way that she often shot them wasn't always the most flattering way, and I think this is definitely one of those cases. It definitely looks like this subject is aware of Vivian's presence and that maybe she's photographing her. And just to start a look on the subject's face, just the authentic expression of, like, you know, who are you? What are you doing? Why are you, you know, why are you so close to me? And the lighting in particular makes the shot really interesting. And yeah, I think it's just the authenticity of the moment and the emotion on the subject, and again the lighting, and I guess you could see the story behind it, and Vivian wanting to capture, I guess, all classes and all areas of the society that she was photographing. So this photo, I think, is, you know, kind of represents Vivian being conscious of, again, marginalized people, or people that would have been quite marginalized at that time in society, in the 50s and 60s in particular. This is in New York City, and it's just an interesting moment. Really good composition. Got some leading lines here going into the shot. And then you kind of have this shape here with the subjects mostly centered on the frame, and I think you have kind of a flow happening here, sort of triangular pattern basically, with the subjects. And I mean, the story is just really interesting because you've got, I think it's the contrast aspect, because you've got this tall, white gentleman with this big dog, very intimidating, and he looks like he's in, you know, probably in a higher class, you know, he's pretty well dressed and everything. And then you've got this small, you know, Asian girl, you know, and she's just, I'm not sure what she's doing here. She's gesturing to him, or she's showing him something, I can't really tell. But it's just a contrast between this guy and this Asian girl, you know. And, you know, it's like innocence versus, you know, who knows, this guy's like some corrupt Wall Street guy or something. But again, it tells a story, and it's an interesting contrasting scene, and I think, you know, it's one of the things that I like about Vivian's work, is she pays attention to these types of things, and you know, these stories of, you know, kind of like David and Goliath, or, you know, just marginalized people doing their thing, or interacting with people that are maybe at that time were a little bit less marginalized in society. I just think it's a great moment, and it's a great capture, and it's an example of her paying attention to the small details that are happening in the street, and being able to capture them, and it's just a great moment. So this photo here was shot in Chicago, and it's just another example of Vivian being able to find these smaller moments and pick out these finer details. And in this case, it's finding this guy, you know, literally a face in the crowd, and capturing at the right moment, where he has a lot of emotion on his face, and seems to be contrasting, his emotion seems to be contrasting with what is going on around him, you know, because he's still looking very contemplative, whereas everyone else is kind of just going about their day and, you know, doing their thing. And you've got the layering here with the person in silhouette and shadow, and you got foreground, middle ground, background, and then the buildings and everything in the far background. And it's just a great composition, great moment, great emotion, great contrast, interesting story. And again, another example of why I love Vivian's work is her just finding these people who just seem displaced in society, and maybe trying to figure out how they fit in. Something that I can relate to myself on a personal level, and as well with the work that I do in street photography as well. So again, another great shot and great find and great moment by Vivian Maier. So in this photo, again, another example of Vivian finding people on the edges of society. In this case, it looks like it's probably some kids that live on the streets, or at least live in poverty or very poor conditions. This is actually shot in Canada, and judging by the French, it might be in Montreal or somewhere in Quebec. And again, it's just an authentic moment, good composition, good light, kind of self-framing happening here, and the emotions on the kids very authentic, and they look kind of startled, kind of curious, and also kind of just wondering who this woman is, pointing this camera at them. And it's just I just feel like it's such a authentic moment with a good story. And I'm guessing at that time not too many photographers would actually shoot these kids out and about doing their thing. And again, good composition, good light, good story, good subjects. So this shot here was taken in Florida. It says here in 1960. She's probably on a boat of some sort, of guessing. And just a cool, intimate moment between this elderly looking couple. Great composition, great light, with light coming mostly from the bright windows on the left. Nice layering, this stuff in the foreground here. Nice leading lines leading towards the subject as well. And above all, just an interesting story happening here, and nice emotions, and again a nice kind of soft, intimate moment. And I kind of also like this guy, looking at Vivian in the camera with like curiosity and intrigue. It's kind of a nice little bonus in the shot. But again, just a great little moment that she's so great at noticing and being able to capture in a way that still leaves the moment being authentic. And you can also see that her distance that she is away from the subjects is not very far at all. She's probably right in the row in front of them, which is basically right next to them, and yet somehow I'm assuming she's using her Rolleiflex for this, which is a huge camera, and somehow she's still able to capture this very authentic and intimate moment without disturbing the scene too much. So again, credit to her. She's that shows her skill as a street photographer, and again, that's something that I really admire, and I try to put into my work as well, getting close to subjects without disturbing the scene too much. And again, when you get so close to subjects, to me, I think it helps the viewer empathize more with the subjects in the scene, rather than shooting, with a longer lens where you're like on the other side of the street, and it kind of gets a more cinematic feel, which is cool. But I think my style relates more to most of Vivian's shots, where it's like you're kind of in the scene and again, hopefully feel a bit more empathy towards the subjects in the scene. And so that kind of brings us to the last shot for this episode of Ballistics, featuring Vivian Maier. And this shot, again, an example of Vivian shooting marginalized people, in this case the racialized black people, and doing so in such a public space in such an obvious way. In the 50s and 60s, I'm guessing was probably very rare, in particular for a white individual to do so. And yet, here she is, Vivian, showing that she has social consciousness, and that she, looking at her work as a whole, she definitely, had a certain worldview that encompassed a lot of curiosity and compassion for people that weren't as well represented in society, and kind of on the margins. And in this case, again, her camera is very close to the subject, and I guess again, just the emotion in the main subject here, and as well as this dude in the background, just curiosity, and they're kind of like, who's this woman and what is she doing? And just all the little details, like, what is this kid wearing? It's like a Disney Mickey Mouse hat, and the little gestures that's happening, and his facial expression and everything. Again, it's about authenticity, and also the little marks on his face, and it kind of tells a story and kind of piques your curiosity about who this kid is, where did he come from, what's he doing out in the city wearing a Mickey Mouse hat and stuff with his buddy. And again, Vivian is walking down the street, and she's able to pick out these details and point her camera in the right way and capture the moment at the right time. And again, that's why this is one of her classic photos, and it's also one of my favorites. And again, she's able to capture people, in particular, black people in the United States, in a empathetic way. And I think that was pretty rare in that time period, especially if the photographer was white. So credit to Vivian. Another classic street photo, and definitely one of my favorites.